All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the October 19th, 2021 iteration of the Kubernetes SIG-windows community meeting. As always, these meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so be sure to adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. Okay, let's jump into some announcements. First announcement on the list is that Containerd 1.6 beta was released last week. I believe it's their beta 0. This has a couple of different, it has some updates to the HCS shim, which fixes a couple of different issues that we're seeing. James was just talking about that, but it also is the first Containerd release that will have proper host process container support. So if people are interested in, if people are planning on testing out Containerd support with Kubernetes on Windows, please give that a try and see if you're running into any issues or have any feedback with that. That's kind of related to the next announcement is that Docker shim is still slated for removal for 124. I think the current plan is, and Dims and Sergey have sent out some emails to the Google group saying Docker shim, like that code path, that's slated to be one of the first things to go into 124. So if I wanted to, again, kind of just open it up and see if anybody has any concerns about this for Windows. I know that in SIG-node, Sergey's been doing a good job of reaching out to a number of like the different cloud providers and seeing where they are with the migration and if there's any concerns. I think everybody so far seems kind of in a similar situation where there's not as much adoption as people would like to see, but the adoption that they do have is at least on par with kind of performance and reliability with Docker. Does anybody have any kind of comments or concerns with Docker shim removal, kind of specific to Windows workloads at this point? If not, or if you do, feel free to raise it to just different various channels in Slack, either SIG-windows, SIG-node, and we can get that routed.
Mark, I don't have any particular concern, but I think in the same thing, it was mentioned that Datadog or something, I don't know how accurate the stats is, but only 6% of all the clusters are using Containerd, the rest of them are all using Docker. That seems like a pretty big percentage. And I think there was concerns of like, we should document something in hand holding folks who are about to move, because, if 94% of the clusters in the world are running Docker, and this is much more than we thought. So I don't know if we should do from a Windows perspective, like some documentation upstream, like is that needed or something else?
Are you thinking about like actual steps on how to provision the nodes to run with Docker or Containerd, or steps?
Yeah, but I'm thinking
we have documented on the Kubernetes website how to install Docker with on Windows nodes and how to configure the kubelet with that. And my hopes are that after that's done, it's seamless. But if anybody feels like that's not sufficient or needs more information, yeah, we can definitely look into that.
Mark, is there anything about, I think what users is going to want is, how do I migrate now? I have Docker installed, everything works with Docker. What's the steps to migrate from Docker to Containerd?
Yeah, that's also kind of called out in the docs.
Okay.
And it's pretty much bring up a new node that's configured with Docker. I think SIG-node and a couple of other folks have kind of explicitly said that they're not they're not documenting or advocating for in-place upgrade or in-place changing of the CRI on nodes. So the recommended guidance there is kind of do a rolling update and just have your new nodes come up with the desired CRI, or
I see.
Containerd in this case.
Yeah, that's good to know, because we are kind of starting on our Containerd journey at the moment at Red Hat, and we were thinking about figuring out if there's a way we could do an in-place upgrade, because customers are going to be kind of annoyed if we tell them, especially in the BYOS space, where they're bringing their own Windows instance, right? If you ask them to go away, reconfigure everything and bring it back, I'm not so sure if they're going to be super happy. But we're still at the beginning of the journey. It might be a no-go. Like there could be lots of issues trying to do an in place.
Yeah, let me try and find more information. I almost remember that SIG-node, some folks in SIG-node had even said that in place changing the CRI is not really supported by the kubelets.
Okay. I can talk to folks in
but-
SIG-node also and ping them and see what goes on. But that's good to know. The other thing I was going to call out is, it's very easy for customers on Windows to install Docker. It's not that easy to install Containerd. I don't know if that's going to be another barrier for some customers. I know it's all documented, but still, like it's not, like you could go and I think enable what is that? Enable something and just say add Docker, and Docker would just get installed, right? It was
there was a NuGet feed
Correct,
that had some PowerShell commands around it that you could run. You could say, just install Docker, and then it'll tell you you're ready to reboot, and then reboot, and it comes up and Docker's running.
Yeah. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, the steps for getting let me. Or James or Muzz, if you have, I see you hopped on. If you have anything to add,
I was wondering if I think I don't know if it's in 2019, but in 2020, is winget available on the server now? Is that something that would make it easier for folks? I don't know much about that, but I just was thinking the way you do it on Linux is via an apt-get install kind of thing, and so I wonder if we had a winget type of thing for Windows, if it would make it easier. I don't know.
I believe that how winget works is there's either GitHub or community repository where you can submit packages to, and you author an install package or script, and then you can publish it to winget. That might be something that our SIG should try and publish, or see if anybody from the Containerd community wants to work on that or not.
I've seen, I think you're calling by the winget CLI on GitHub, Mark. Yeah, I think that's the way to go. I think I've seen something similar at some point submitted, but I don't know. Maybe we should follow up.
Mm-hmm. The steps, I posted a link to the steps for installing Containerd on Windows, and they're not that much more complicated. Arvind, I think there are a lot more knobs and settings that you could tweak that may not be they're not necessary, but you could tweak those. I think that's where the differences are. I think Docker is a lot less configurable, but also just a lot more kind of purpose built for doing what it does and running containers there. But the basic steps are you download the package, extract the contents of the package, use Containerd to spit out a default config file, and then edit the config file, and then run the service. And also we have found that if you are running Containerd, it is very important to add a defender exclusion to point to the executable wherever that is in your system. That will help solve a lot of performance issues that folks have been seeing and reporting.
I see. Yeah, I'm just calling it out. I'm not saying it's too difficult or anything. I'm just saying the differences.
But
does this also include HCS shim also?
Yes, it does. This package, the packages that are being built on from Containerd contain a paired version of HCS shim.
Okay. Yeah, and the only other thing that I have noticed, which might be an issue for some folks, is so in our kubelet configuration, we increased the image pull timeout to 30 minutes because all customers were refusing to pre-pull images. They were like, we don't want to pre-pull images. That option is not available with Containerd. So that might be another, I don't know if everybody's using the increased pre-pull time for the kubelet. That is not supported by Containerd. You can set it in the kubelet, but it doesn't take effect.
It might be, is that one of the settings that's documented as only it?
Docker, yeah.
Yeah, it might be configurable in the kubelet or in the container deconfig.
Okay, so
We'll have, we can check
yeah,
on
because
that.
I remember there being an open issue for enabling this option on Containerd and no work being done on it, but I can look it up later. That might have changed.
Claudio, do you know if that's the case? If not, we can come back to this later. But yeah, that is a good thing to call out, especially with server core images being so large.
Can you repeat the question, please?
So Arvind was saying that with Docker shim, there's a kubelet flag for setting the image pull timeouts that they set for a long timeout in their clusters. And we're wondering if there's a similar way to, but that setting only would take effect if you're running with Docker shim. We were wondering if there's a similar setting or way to configure that behavior for Containerd.
Oh, I'll have to check as well. But from what I saw, there isn't, but I might be mistaken. I'll take a look right now.
Okay. Yeah.
I know that you would actually time out and your image wouldn't get pulled with Docker shim. Whereas I don't know if I've seen that with Containerd. I didn't realize that didn't get passed through. So
Yeah, if it works out of the box without the timeout, yeah. But they do have an open issue. I quickly did a search. I don't know what happened with it, but
Okay, well, we'll have to investigate with
Yeah.
that.
What's up, Mark?
AJ. All right, and if anybody has any other announcements, please feel free to speak up. If not, I'm gonna hand it over to Muzz to do a quick recap of his KubeCon experience.
one thing I wanted to mention about the Containerd 1.6 beta with the host process support is if you were using annotations prior to this, you'll want to remove them from your Containerd config. I was talking with Perry and he didn't realize that we don't need those anymore. The host process field is getting passed through the cry layer now, which means you can set like some sort of policy saying you can't set this for these namespaces. And if you pass the annotations through on the Containerd config, then somebody could potentially bypass that type of policy. So just wanted to quickly mention that if anybody was playing around with it and using annotations earlier.
I cannot.
So the annotations don't work, or they do?
They do, but I don't. Most cases you don't need it anymore. It was kind of a workaround while the cry didn't have support, but now it does.
Yeah, in 122, when the feature was in alpha, the kubelet, we authored the kubelet to send both the annotations on the CRI calls and to populate the structures in the CRI call. But Containerd initially only understood the annotations, but after that implementation went into Containerd, it was no longer necessary to pass in the annotations across as well. And just recently, we've removed the code to set the annotations on the kubelet.
Okay. Well, so how does Containerd intercept the host process?
There's fields on the CRI on the CRI objects that get passed over on like container create that say that this is a host process container or not.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that. So host process is part of the CRI specification.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's the exact fields are in the KEP.
Cool. Okay.
All right. Yeah, Muzz, do you want to share a little bit? I know Muzz actually was able to attend KubeCon in person, and I think attended the SIG meet and greet and met with some users and customers, and was curious how everything went.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to quickly recap the experience. So it was pretty great to be back at KubeCon. I think people were very excited who were comfortable to be there. It was a lot less audience. Like, normally we get like 15,000, 20,000 people, but it was like 4,000 people. So the crowd wasn't that much. So in terms of from a Windows perspective specifically, so on the session, Mark, you, Jay, and the others did. I heard quite a feedback after the session, like outside, where people like the dev aspect, especially what Jay has been working on, how to set up dev. They really, I mean, a couple of people said, I love that this session was so like dev oriented. I've been to previous sessions and it wasn't that much dev focus or developer focus. So that kind of resonated with folks. The host process containers, people loved it. They said literally, like there were 2 folks there who said literally that's the thing that was stopping me from using Windows containers. So I think that was kind of resonating. The other thing I was kind of surprised to, but it was kind of a theme across the board wherever I went to, whether it's sessions or anything related to Windows, people were very interested in Windows Server 2022, which was a little bit surprising to me because I mean it's pretty new. You could have a lot of questions about Windows, which is not Windows Server 2022, but it seems like there is a lot of interest and wait for Windows Server 2022 being supported in Kubernetes. I was asked many times when it's going to be supported. I told them, the tests are being done. There are multiple, folks trying to do that. When I dug into the Windows Server 2022, why it's being so popular, one is a lot of folks starting, they just want to start directly with Windows Server 2022. The other surprising thing was the Argonne compatibility, the backward compatibility. People are just afraid that, even the patches, which is not true, by the way, like the patch mismatch, even in Windows Server 2019. So if your host is on a different patch and your container is on a different patch, it should totally work as long as the major version is the same. And I think it's pretty documented, but folks are very afraid and they want to use this Windows Server 2022 when it's like the Argonne backward compatibility we announced. They're very interested in that because they just feel safer to use Windows Server 2022.
Argonne is process isolated containers. Is that correct?
Correct.
For folks who
that's
may
true.
not know that.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's how we internally say it in Microsoft. So yeah, so the kernel backward compatibility that Brandon announced moving forward for Windows Server 2022, that resonated a lot with folks. The last thing was the service mesh with Windows Server 2022 actually was announced. I don't know if you guys saw it, the OSM demo. People loved it. Actually, I heard a couple of folks talking about it outside. So that was, again, a little bit surprising. One other thing I think I noticed, which speaks pretty highly of this SIG. So I've been to KubeCon like since probably 2017. And every KubeCon, like majority of the folk would be, hey, Windows container is a thing. And this is probably the first time where most of the folks I met, they're already either using Windows containers and Kubernetes or planning to use it heavily. I think there were like very few folks who were still surprised by Windows containers. So that was a little bit different. The last thing I wanted to bring up here, and I think Luther is on the call, he brought it up at SIG Meet, and then I met a couple of folks afterward as well, and it kind of resonated, which is basically, there are folks in the community in general who want to contribute to Windows containers, like bringing it parity with Linux, but they're not able to because the getting it started or getting VMs that can run Kubernetes, Windows. So basically getting the Windows licenses and then getting those VMs kind of becomes a hurdle for them. And I think Jay and who else, like there are great people working here on that, Ross and all the other folks, James. But I think there is a little bit lack of awareness probably on that. And then also, I don't know how the licensing works and stuff, but there was definitely a feedback. So I don't know, Luther, if you're here, if you want to say something on that. I also heard the same feedback from Argo folks who were working. They said, hey, we're happy to do it for Windows, but don't know how to get it started. And there were other folks like that as well. Luther, you want to?
Yeah, man, this is 100% a problem that we've seen. Like we go into WMI exporter was one that was a big one. The Prometheus guys have that exporting tool, right? And they didn't care to even try building it on Windows and see what's going on until we just went in and started doing it for them. So I'm going to add, so we were talking about getting resources, is what Muzz and I were talking about, was I'm going to add Flannel to use GitHub Actions and try to use some of the 2019, 2022, the 2022 beta that's there to see if we can't build some images. We don't use them yet, right? Because it's not, it can't do, images can't run the CNI yet. But I 100% want to start building them and see how it works, because then I can transport that to the WMI kids and some other stuff. We have people who make Helm charts that have a Windows component to it, are monitoring and logging. And just getting those projects to update their stuff has been a pain. Drone has been a pain. I don't know if you guys have ever had to get your CI running on multiple versions of Windows, but it's a nightmare. I saw Tecton just got their stuff released, right? But like Drone had the different SACs, and it was very hard to get stuff updated. They still haven't updated, right? So I don't know, bit of pain. And I think anything that helps people generate images is just where you need to start, just to get people trained on it.
So Luther, you know all the tools we have. So what's the actual problem? Because I know you know about Image Builder and you know about the dev tools. So are those not working for you, or do you and me need to just hang out for a couple of hours and go through how it all works?
We can hang out for a couple of hours. That's always fun. But the problem we have is that there are perfectly good, simple network apps, not even complicated, that could be running on Windows containers, that could be running like just an API or something just sitting there, but nobody has any motivation to build an image. And it's usually resources. It's usually that someone doesn't want to spend $1 to have a 2019 or 2022 server, and SAC servers were even worse because you'd have to have every different version. Like, it's just a nightmare, right?
So it sounds like this is a whole thing we haven't actually addressed, which is you're talking about Docker images and people not knowing how to publish and build them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so like Claudio did a ton of work, and like we had the same problem in the Kubernetes project for the pause image and for all of the test infrastructure images. And what with Docker build kit, we're actually able to build simple Windows container images on Linux nodes. And that's version, like Windows OS version agnostic. Now there are a lot of caveats from that, like which the set of commands you can use in the Docker file are limited. I think they're limited to things like from, copy, add, and like env start, and a couple things like that. But if for very simple like apps that where it's like I have a binary and some config and I want to just stick it in an image and get it to run on Windows, we figured out how to do that from Linux builds. So maybe another thing is to evangelize that a little bit, because if I can understand that people don't want to mess with, you know, Windows hosts just to build like a smaller part of their project. But if we could say, you know, here's a way, here's a Docker file, here's how to author it so you can build it on the same hosts that you're building your Linux container images on. I wonder if that would help increase adoption. Were you aware of that functionality, Luther?
No, however, I'm not sure just those 3 or 4 basic little commands is everything that we need, but it's closer. It's a lot closer.
So as Mark mentioned, you can actually build a lot of things using Docker buildx. It's not just those commands. The trick is to use multi-stage Docker files, which basically means you have a Linux stage. You can do literally anything you want there. Even for pause images and stuff like that, we do use cross compilation. So basically we build the Windows binaries on Linux and then just copy them over to Windows.
That is exactly what we do in one of our projects too, and that works perfect. But it was having that base server core image that we had to start everything from. My convo with Muzz was more around the lines of, if you have open source projects out there who could easily have a Windows opportunity, like just build it. I mean, there's things that could just have an image and it would run if they would just add a manifest for it. Make it simple. It was like, get the the GitHub action stuff working, and then just like start checking in a commit and say, look, here's an action. It'll do exactly what you need. Just add a Docker hub login and password and you'll build your images. Like, make it simple. That was kind of my thing. Like everything you guys are talking about is way advanced for most normal people who just want to build some goofy network app with an API.
That's accurate. So I think, Mark, the feedback is, and we can get into it. Thank you, Luther, for bringing it up. Is number one is there are a lot of projects now in CNCF that are in incubation state or different states that there is demand for Windows. And I'm happy to be in SIG-windows, or anybody wants to partner up with me to go to those things. And, as Luther is saying, to tell them, hey, do you want to build this for Windows as well? Right. So that's one thing. Number two is this awareness or like documentation or, whatever Jay and others everybody's doing here for the dev tools. Is there something else needed, right? When we are interacting with these other folks like Drone, Flannel, Argo, like these are all want to do it on Windows, but apparently it's not easy. That's the feedback we're getting, right? So could we do something else?
Maybe we need a
Let's dig
Windows
into it.
pet store. Maybe what we need is like we need that. So we have an image builder that we put in the dev tool. Maybe we need like those three things, right? Drone, Flannel, Argo, right? Like maybe we should literally have a thing in there like, okay, you're a developer, you want an environment to test in, here's how you could do it. You're a developer, you want to publish things. Here's a way to do it. It's like we could integrate that with the rest of the process when we spin up that dev thing, so that like at least next time somebody wanted to publish a Windows image, they had a single place to go where they could spin up the environment to test it on, but they also could literally follow directions in there to build the images according to Claudio's and Mark's sort of some of the blueprints that they just mentioned. But then again, I see what you mean, Luther. That's still kind of advanced, but it's less advanced than the current situation we have, where you have to like go on the internet and like, I don't know, look at how the pause image is built, right? It's like an incremental step, right? I think.
And I also wonder if, like, a couple of times people said that they were happy that SAC releases are going away. I wonder if that's going to simplify things too, because I am not positive, but I'm pretty sure that there are GitHub actions where you can request the machine, like a Windows machine, but it only supported Windows Server 2019 at the time. So I'm wondering if a lot of people were like, oh no, there's a whole bunch of versions of Windows and I only see one of them supported and it doesn't look like the latest version, so I don't want to figure this all out. But now if there's going to be like Windows Server 2019, Windows Server 2022, and you can have a GitHub action to build your container images, that might simplify things
I
quite a
think
bit.
that has made my life so much easier. I have to say I appreciate it. It's 100% a better solution, because not only that, but you'd have people who would never upgrade. So we'd spend all this effort and time into 2004, 20H2, and everyone was like, well, it's not an LTSC. We're sticking on 2019. We're like, well, we just wasted our time. Thanks. Nothing you could do about it.
So, yeah, it
that's
sounds
all
like there's just
good.
a big lack of knowledge about how to deal with this problem. Like,
There are so many tools that would work perfectly fine on Windows nodes, perfectly fine. But we always say we have to have a Linux worker to be able to run a Kubernetes cluster. And I'm not convinced that's true. There's things, core DNS, et cetera, that you can just compile it and get it running. They just don't have it, right? Like you could get to a point. That's my theory.
oh, the Windows native cluster.
Yeah, one day.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that was an interesting feedback, but that's the recap. I know we're over time. Sorry, Aravind, you had some important thing to discuss.
We could give Aravind a chance to look at this, and then my agenda item we can push to next week.
Yeah, but I don't know, we should be fair to everyone. It's been over 10 o'clock. If we should, we can push this to next week. We should, I can talk about it, but if folks want to.
Can you give like a 30-second summary, Aravind?
Yeah.
What you're looking for?
30-second summary is, I think we've been discussing this topic for a while, and we finally decided we need to document the current state of projected volumes. That I think is a given. I can open a PR, a doc PR, to add it to maybe the projected volume page. I think the topic for discussion, I think James and I were briefly discussing this, is in OpenShift, we have a little bit of a hack. If some user is on a cluster where there's an admission controller that actually adds security context, and you end up with run as user and run as username on a pod, on a Windows pod, that Windows pod will not come up. And to overcome that issue, we sort of don't try and do the chown for the Windows case. James and I were discussing whether we should just document this as in, hey, don't do this, or should we add this as a workaround in upstream also?
So Arvind, Brandon is from the Windows side, who are like, expert in this area, right? Who are the dev like main. He's following up on that. So I would say add it as an option, whatever like you feel like is the right thing to do. We can get it reviewed and then go from there. We'll put the weight, behind it.
Yeah, sorry, Arvind, this has been on my list for a while. I just been hit with a bunch of different things. So I'm definitely let's chat about this. I want to get this documented and on the road.
Okay, yeah, I think the documentation is a given. We can document it. It's just that, do we need this workaround in the code?
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
Brandon can confirm
totally
that
agree.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
I think it's a little bit more complicated than just whether or not we can put it in there. Because, yeah, but I think we should probably just put this at the top of the list next week so we can discuss it.
Yeah, I was gonna re-add it to the list. I think that we'll want to, like, if we decide that we do want to try and change it upstream, we'll probably need to make a case to do that in SIG-node as well. And they might have some feedback, so maybe we should, next week I'll add it to the SIG-windows agenda, and I can also add it to the SIG-node agenda, and you can talk about it in like SIG-node, and if folks can't join, I can report back.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, so we'll push this to this will be the first thing we talk about next week then, too. Right. Thank you, everybody, and well, thanks for attending this week's community meeting. Have a good week.
Thanks.
Starting the pairing now, if folks want to hang out.
All right, let me stop the recording.